Today we're going to be talking about interest groups and lobbying in Texas. Not the most exciting topic in the world, but especially for political science, because there's so many other things that seem so much more interesting to talk about. But let's talk about interest groups because they are actually really important. And so first thing we want to do is we want to create a couple of definitions, which is an interest group itself, which is an organization of individuals sharing common goals that all try to influence government relations or decisions in some way. And the other definition to get to know is political action committees. And these are really important because they go hand in hand with the whole idea of an interest group. And what these are organizations that collect and distribute money to candidates. Sometimes they've been declared illegal, sometimes they've been curtailed a bit. Currently, they pretty much have quite a bit of power, and there's been no real attempt lately to kind of push back on them. So the idea of lobbyists and interest groups and this sort of thing, it stems from a couple of really important foundations in our government. Going to our federal government, because I know we're talking about Texas government here, but our federal government, there are certain, not just requirements, but certain stipulations and benefits and rights that are inherent in the system. And one of them happens to be the right to, protest or to bring up questions to your government or ask questions of your government, to publish information, that sort of thing. And so going hand in hand with that is pretty much the right to go and try to influence your government in order to get things specifically done. So the idea is, or at least the theory is that it's a lot easier to work with the government to try to get the government to do things that you actually want it to do, rather than just kind of sit back and kind of hope government gets around to doing it just, because they're nice and they're going to want to do that. So that's why interest groups are really important, because these are people who get together, a whole bunch of people with ideas, and try to make them actually happen. Now, one of the fears of interest groups in the very beginning comes from James Madison. James Madison, one of our founding fathers, and also but he is basically the father of the Constitution. He warned in Federalist 10, he wrote under another name, I think Publius was the name he was using at the time. And so a bunch of the founding fathers used to actually produce documents and articles about the founding of the country, and they would do it in different Federalist papers. And so it's kind of like the newspaper at the time, but like a more official kind of a thing. So anyway, in Federalist number 10, one of the predictions that James Madison had was that interest groups or factions would end up becoming significant, and they would take a significant role in American politics. And so he was right, because it's exactly what happened. And so it's one of those kinds of things to keep in mind, because if left unchecked, which it has over in many, many situations in different times, it can get out of control to where sometimes an interest group will have more power than the people in the government itself, just because government has little control over what they're actually doing. There are a couple of different types of interest groups. The most obvious one is one that requires membership. So if you're part of an organization that its job is to lobby, you will basically either pay dues or just sign papers or whatever it is to get into the membership. Like a good example is the American Automobile Association. So their job is to influence national policy, and sometimes state policy, depends on if it's a localized version of it or the national version. But if their job is to convince government to do certain things that benefit drivers, because that's literally what their mandate is all about. And so in order to get this done, like if they tried to get a whole bunch of people together to pay dues to their organization to say, hey, we're going to influence government on driving, no one's going to give them any money. So what they have done is they've created other services. So like if you need maps and all these other kinds of things built or designed, they're the organization to go to. And by being a member of theirs, you can avail yourself of these services. So that's one of a membership organization. Sometimes they'll just do directly the things they do is directly, and they don't actually have other things they're doing at the same time. So like the National Rifle Association, it's an interest group, and it tries to influence government policy for Second Amendment rights and gun rights and stuff to that effect. But at the same time, the majority of their money, sorry, 1 second. The majority of their money comes from the dues that they're getting from their members. But unlike the AAA, they don't spend a lot of their effort actually producing stuff for their members, like maps and all that kind of stuff, as opposed to actually doing something for the issue that they're trying to generate, which makes sense because that's why people join them in the first place, is they care about that specific issue. We also have what are called non-membership organizations, which means people join it without actually paying dues or getting into specific organizations. And there's a bunch of those pretty much all across the country. And the third organization is actually called governmental. It's government organizations. So basically, sometimes government will actually act as a lobbyist or an interest group in order to get something done for like its agency or for the issues that they're actually doing. So like the EPA will have specific foundational ideas that they're trying to espouse and get government to do. So sometimes they'll try to influence Congress to do something else that's not specifically in their purview and under their control. So that's when they act as an outside kind of an organization, but still doing what they're supposed to be doing. So how do they actually do this? So for one thing, interest groups tend to do a lot of electioneering, so they try to help candidates get elected. And so they don't just help random people running for office, it's people who have kind of the same agenda they do. And so like if you're the AAA and you want to find somebody that's actually going to help you, you look for somebody that's going to take up issues that help the people within your organization. And so that's kind of how they get what they do. They also do what's called public relations. And so they'll spend a lot of time trying to influence the policies in the process, or even just the general theme of what they actually discuss on a normal basis. So like a good example is the NRA. They're all for a pro-gun rights movement, or they are a movement of that. And so what they will do is they will spend a lot of time trying to influence people into kind of buying into the same ideas that they have, or at least going and trying to support the people who do have those particular issues that sometimes run afoul of the law or have concerns, legal concerns and stuff like that. They also do what's kind of tied to that, which is litigation. In litigation, sometimes they will actually sue in favor of something or against something because it fits the agenda of what they're actually trying to do. So there's a couple of terms to also keep in mind. My throat is really bad. Hold on, give me a second. So one of them is called rent seeking. And it's an important term to know. And the reason why it's important is a lot of times an interest group will try very hard to make itself benefit from the legislation that it's trying to put forth. So it'll when it influences congressional members or whoever they're actually trying to influence, or the department that they're influencing, because they don't have to they don't have to just go and lobby government. They can also lobby specific you know, executive departments in order that actually have a same kind of premise that they're doing, and so they'll try to get them to get things passed, or more favorable legislation, or try to get them to stop you know, litigation against some particular issue because they believe this way, and they'd rather have government side with them on that particular issue than side with the way government might naturally go, just because of, you know, that's the popular thing at that particular time. So that's rent seeking. So what they do is they try to influence that sort of thing. So they try to secure benefits for themselves. So it's kind of a self-serving kind of a process in the whole interest group philosophy. The other thing is, and this is called capturing. Capture is a kind of an interesting concept of where it's a state agency or a board. It falls under the heavy influence of like whoever's being controlled, and no, I'm sorry, they are the controller. And so what they try to do is they try to use their influence and their lobbying power and their just their knowledge of kind of like what's actually going on in the world or in that particular sphere of influence, and try to get things done that actually work in their favor. And once they've got it working in their favor and they're the go-to after that, it's called capturing. So they've literally captured the government or captured the whole idea, and they're the go-to, so therefore they're the only choice in kind of how things actually get done. That's really looked down upon, and government tries to go through a lot of process to make sure that doesn't actually happen. This has happened in the past with, especially in Texas, with like the oil industry, where the oil industry got onto used their lobbyists to get into government positions like the Texas Railroad Commission. And then because they were in charge and they were making the rules, they could make good rules for just their people. And so that's called capturing. And therefore what happens is a lot less competition, a lot less good benefits for the people in general, and just benefits for those who are profiting from the whole process. So that's our basic, you know, genre of interest groups. Not a whole lot to share on it, but I just wanted to give you kind of the basis of something to kind of keep in mind and understand that this is kind of how it works. And going forward, these are the things to know, so make sure you do.